Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I want to speak to you today. In the vast tapestry of existence, every soul is a thread, woven not by chance but by design. And some threads, though quiet in their strength, carry the weight of healing across generations. The Super Empath walks this earth not with thunder in their voice, but with a silence that speaks louder than cruelty, a stillness that disarms the chaos of the narcissist storm. They are not warriors by armor, but by presence, called not to conquer, but to illuminate what darkness would rather remain unseen. For pain does not always cry aloud, and truth does not always shout. Sometimes it arrives as a whisper in the night through those who've suffered deeply and still choose to love. In this great and sacred dance of becoming, it is not the loudest who change the world, but the ones who listen deeply, feel fully, and love when it makes no sense to. And perhaps in God's symphony, you were never meant to be the noise, but the note that brings the music into meaning. There's something quietly remarkable about a soul that feels everything so deeply. In a world that often praises the loud, the confident, the assertive, there walks among us a different kind of strength. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need a spotlight. It listens. It notices. It weeps, even when no one is watching. And often it suffers in silence, not because it is weak, but because it was never meant to be like the rest. You see, sensitivity has gotten a bad name. We treat it like it's a flaw to be fixed, a burden to be carried, something to outgrow. But what if I told you it is none of those things? What if sensitivity is a calling, sacred and divine? What if those who feel deeply are heaven's chosen instruments, tuned with exquisite precision to the unseen rhythms of the human heart? There are those in life who can walk into a room and immediately sense what no one is saying. They notice the tension behind the smile, the sorrow beneath the laughter, the hunger for love behind the harsh words. That's not coincidence, that's spiritual design. That's the soul of a super empath. They're not just emotionally aware, they're divinely aware. They don't merely sympathize, they absorb. And this is not a curse, it's a commission. God doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't over-design. And when He placed that depth of compassion inside you, when He gave you the capacity to hurt for others as if it were your own pain, it wasn't just for survival, it was for healing. He placed you on this earth as a quiet antidote to the rising tide of emotional chaos. The narcissist, by contrast, operates in a completely different reality. Their world is crafted from image and illusion, from performance and projection. They build walls so tall they forget what it means to truly feel. But the super empath, they tear those walls down, not with violence, not with vengeance, but simply by being. Just by standing in truth, they begin to undo the falsehoods others have built their lives around. It's not that the empath wants to expose anyone. That's never the goal. It's that their very presence becomes a mirror the narcissist cannot stand to look into for too long. Because where the narcissist seeks control, the empath embodies surrender. Where the narcissist manipulates, the empath feels. Where the narcissist pretends, the empath remains deeply, vulnerably real. And the world needs real, desperately. But let me tell you, being this way is not easy. The empath will question their place in the world. They will wonder if they're too much, if they care too deeply, if they're wrong for not being able to harden like the rest. And yet the truth is, they were never meant to be like the rest. They were never meant to fit in with noise. They were made to carry the quiet thunder of compassion, the gentle power that heals the invisible wounds others never dared to face. And so, if you are one of these souls, if life has made you tender, if love has left you aching but still willing, if you find yourself feeling everything and understanding even the things no one ever says, then maybe, just maybe, God has placed something extraordinary inside you, not to be crushed by the world, but to transform it. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not too much. You are exactly as He intended you to be. And when God designed your heart to feel so deeply, He wasn't giving you a burden, He was giving you a key. There's a peculiar thing about light. It doesn't have to shout to be noticed. It doesn't need to argue with the darkness. It simply arrives, and the darkness has no choice but to recede. That's the quiet power of truth, and that's the quiet power of the super empath. You see, the narcissist builds their life like a stage play. Every move is calculated, every emotion rehearsed. They wear masks so convincingly that even they forget what lies beneath. They create illusions, grand ones, that cast them as the hero, the victim, the savior, anything but what they truly are. And for a time, those illusions work. People are drawn in. They believe the performance. They applaud the act. But then someone walks into their life who doesn't just see with the eyes, they see with the soul. That's the super empath. And their presence alone begins to do something remarkable. Not because they confront or accuse, not because they expose in anger or vengeance, but because they live in truth. And truth, my friend, has a way of unsettling every lie it touches. The super empath doesn't try to dismantle the narcissist. That's not their intention. They just live honestly, love purely, feel deeply. And in doing so, they become a kind of mirror. A mirror that doesn't distort, doesn't flatter, doesn't bend to make someone more comfortable. It just reflects. And the narcissist, who has spent years avoiding their own reflection, can't bear to look too long. Because in the eyes of the empath, the games are seen for what they are. The masks no longer hold. The charm begins to crack. That kind of silent exposure is powerful, more powerful than confrontation, more powerful than resistance, because the narcissist depends on confusion and chaos to maintain their control. But the empath carries clarity. They bring order, they bring discernment that can't be manipulated. They're not swayed by empty flattery or emotional bait. They don't play the game. And when someone refuses to play, the game itself begins to fall apart. There's something holy about that kind of clarity. It's not prideful. It's not self-righteous. It's simply the presence of someone who knows who they are, even when they've been broken. Someone who doesn't need to shout to be heard, because the weight of their soul speaks louder than noise ever could. But this doesn't come without cost. Many empaths walk through seasons of doubt. They wonder why they see what others don't, why they feel the tension when no one else does, why they can't just ignore the lies and carry on. And yet, that discomfort, that divine discomfort, is proof of their purpose. They were never meant to blend in. They were meant to reveal. Not by fighting, not by preaching, not by forcing their way in, but by standing quietly, firmly, honestly. And that honesty, that unshakable authenticity, slowly begins to erode the foundation of deception. Not with rage, but with reverence. Not with pride, but with presence. The narcissist cannot maintain their illusion in the face of someone who sees through it, but refuses to become bitter because of it. That's the kind of light the world doesn't understand, but desperately needs. So if you've ever felt like your truth made others uncomfortable, if you've ever been accused of seeing too much or being too intense, if you've ever been made to feel small because your spirit wouldn't accept the lie, then I want you to know you were never the problem, you were the answer. Because the kind of light you carry, it doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to prove itself. It only needs to shine. And when the truth walks into the room, it doesn't need to speak to be heard. Still waters. That's what comes to mind when I think of the super empath. Not turbulent, not loud, not seeking to make a scene, but deep, unmoved, steady. There's a reason the scriptures speak of still waters, because that kind of calm is rare, and when you find it, you know you're standing in something sacred. The super empath doesn't win battles by force. They don't scream their way into victory. They win by remaining rooted. While the narcissist thrives in the whirlwind, stirring up conflict, twisting words, turning people against each other, the empath holds their ground. And it's not because they don't feel the urge to react. It's because they've learned, sometimes through great pain, that not every fight is worth stepping into. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Now, to the outside world, that silence might look like weakness. People might say, "Why don't you speak up? Why don't you strike back? Why do you let them treat you this way?" But what they don't see is that this stillness is not passive, it's intentional. It's strength under control. The super empath is not ignoring the storm. They're choosing not to be moved by it. And that kind of restraint terrifies the narcissist. Because narcissists feed off reaction, that's how they measure their control. By how much they can provoke, how deeply they can unsettle, how quickly they can pull you into their web. But the empath's stillness, it's like standing in front of a storm and refusing to flinch. It denies the narcissist their power. It confuses them. Because in the empath's calm, there is something unshakable, something they cannot manipulate or command. You see, peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of trust. And the super empath has learned, sometimes the hard way, that when you carry peace within you, the world's chaos doesn't have the final word. God's still small voice becomes louder than the noise outside. That's not weakness, that's spiritual authority. Now, I'm not saying empaths don't feel. Oh, they feel deeply, more than most. But they've learned to take those feelings and lay them before the Lord. They don't lash out. They don't seek revenge. They go inward, they get quiet, they pray, and in that silence, God does something remarkable. He strengthens them, He fills them, He makes them immovable. The narcissist will throw insults, twist facts, play the victim, and create chaos. And still, the empath stands, not because they don't feel the pain, but because they've chosen not to be ruled by it. They've chosen to be guided by something greater, truth, love, purpose, and this, my friend, is what begins to unravel the narcissist's control. Not a grand confrontation, not a dramatic fallout, but quiet, unwavering, sacred stillness. The kind of presence that speaks without speaking, that says, you cannot shake what you didn't build, you cannot destroy what you did not create. In the eyes of the empath, the narcissist sees someone they cannot control, and that's where their power begins to fade. Because it's not about winning an argument or proving a point. It's about standing in the truth of who you are and refusing to become what tried to break you. That stillness, that peace, it comes from knowing you're not fighting alone. It comes from walking with the one who calmed the seas with just a word. And when that kind of peace lives in you, no storm outside can undo what God has done within. So if you've chosen silence over chaos, if you've stayed grounded when everything around you screamed for reaction, if you've stood still in the face of manipulation, then know this: your stillness is not empty, it is power, it is presence. It is the echo of heaven moving through you. And sometimes the loudest sound in the room is the one who never raised their voice. There's a quiet kind of transformation that takes place when a person chooses to let their pain shape them rather than shatter them. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not dramatic or loud, but it's real and it's sacred. The super empath knows this journey all too well, because they are often forged in fire, wounds, betrayals, disappointments that cut deeper than most could ever understand. But here's the mystery. The very pain that tried to destroy them becomes the foundation of their purpose. Some people spend their lives running from pain, numbing it, burying it, pretending it never happened. But the super empath does something different. They sit with it. They feel it. They carry it to God and say, "This hurt me, but don't let it be wasted." And God, in His mercy, begins the slow work of turning ashes into beauty, not just for their sake, but for the sake of others who are still walking through their own fire. You see, when someone has been through deep pain and has chosen to heal, to forgive, to grow, they gain an authority that can't be faked. They walk into a room and they don't need to say a word. You can feel it. There's a depth in their eyes, a softness in their voice, a strength that doesn't need to be proven. That's what makes the super empath so uniquely powerful in the presence of the narcissist. Because the narcissist world is all about image, protecting it, projecting it, performing it. But the empath, their life is about authenticity. They've faced the darkness. They've wrestled with grief. They've wept through nights no one else saw, and yet they're still standing. And that right there is what the narcissist can't imitate. They can pretend to be strong, pretend to be wise, pretend to be in control, but they cannot replicate the depth that only comes from healing. What's more, the super empath's ability to see through people doesn't come from suspicion or judgment, it comes from survival. They've had to learn the hard way who is safe and who is not. Their discernment is not a skill, it's a scar. It's been earned through tears and time and truth. And because of this, they can walk into toxic dynamics and see what others cannot. They don't fall for charm. They aren't fooled by flattery. They know what manipulation feels like because they've lived through it. And instead of becoming bitter, they've chosen to become better. Instead of closing off their hearts, they've opened them wider, but with wisdom. They've learned to love with boundaries, to help without losing themselves, to speak truth with grace. That's not natural, that's supernatural. That's redemption at work in the soul of a human being. Pain, when placed in the hands of God, becomes a tool, not just for your growth, but for the healing of others. The super empath is proof of that. They don't just carry their own story, they become a safe place for others to find theirs. They walk into the lives of the broken and say, "I see you, I've been there, and you're not alone." And make no mistake, this kind of presence dismantles the narcissist's entire system, because the narcissist feeds off of unhealed wounds. They prey on those still searching for their worth. But when someone walks in fully aware of their scars, fully rooted in who they are, fully surrendered to what God has done in their life, the narcissist loses their grip. It's not a battle of force, it's a revelation of truth. And truth, once seen, can't be unseen. That's the quiet revolution the super empath brings, not by destroying others, but by becoming whole themselves. So if life has broken you, if you've walked through pain so deep you thought you'd never find your way out, take heart. That wasn't the end. That was the beginning of something holy, something powerful, because the very fire that tried to consume you has now become the light that leads others home. There is a kind of love in this world that doesn't break when it's rejected. A kind of love that keeps giving even after it's been misunderstood, misused, and unappreciated. It's not soft in the way the world defines softness. No, it's fierce. It's holy. It's the kind of love that doesn't give up, not because it lacks boundaries, but because it's anchored in something deeper than ego or emotion. That kind of love lives inside the super empath. It's important to understand this love isn't blind. The empath sees everything. They notice the manipulation, the gaslighting, the silent treatments, the emotional games. They feel the subtle digs, the shifting moods, the moments when their light is being dimmed just to protect someone else's ego. But even so, their instinct is to love. Not from a place of weakness, but from a well that goes far deeper than the narcissist could ever understand. You see, the narcissist operates from lack. Everything is about preserving self-image, maintaining control, extracting attention, Their version of love is transactional. What can I gain from this? How does it serve me? How does it make me feel powerful? But the super empath, they give from abundance. They love from overflow. Not because the other person deserves it, but because their heart was designed to reflect something divine. And that's why the narcissist cannot truly comprehend the super empath. Because the empath's love doesn't play by the same rules. It's not reactive, it's not performance-based. It's rooted in something unshakable: truth, grace, conviction. The empath knows that love isn't about control, it's about freedom. And in that freedom, the narcissist feels exposed, vulnerable, outmatched. Because this kind of love doesn't chase, it doesn't beg, it doesn't grovel to be chosen. It remains, it watches, it waits. And when necessary, it walks away, not in bitterness, but in wisdom. That kind of love, full of compassion, but guarded by truth, is the very thing that dismantles the narcissist's hold. Let me tell you something. It's easy to match hate with hate. It's easy to shut down, go cold, and build walls. The world is full of that kind of survival. But the empath chooses something higher. Not because they're naive, but because they're spiritually awake. They know that love isn't meant to enable destruction. It's meant to be a mirror that says, I see you. I will not become you, but I will also not lose myself trying to rescue you. And that line, that holy boundary, is what begins to shift everything. The empath can't be used forever. Eventually their discernment rises, their clarity sharpens, and their love matures into something even stronger: wisdom. That's when the tables begin to turn. Because the narcissist, who once believed they were in control, now stands face to face with someone who loves them deeply, but will no longer tolerate the destruction. And that's a powerful moment, because there's nothing more unsettling to a narcissist than realizing they can no longer manipulate the very person who once gave them everything. That kind of resistance, quiet, loving, clear, is what breaks the illusion. The empath doesn't need revenge. They don't need to tear the narcissist down. They simply rise, they heal, they grow, and in doing so, they become untouchable. This, dear friends, is the heart of divine love. It's not fragile, it's not foolish, it's fire and light. It's strong enough to care and wise enough to walk away. And it leaves a mark not just on the one who received it, but on everyone who witnessed it. So if you've ever felt that your love was too much, too intense, too soft for a hard world, hear this. You were not made to be less. You were made to reflect a kind of love that changes everything, even if it takes time. Because the greatest power in this world is love that knows when to stay and when to let go. There comes a time in every journey when silence is no longer enough, when stillness has done its work and love has run its course. That's when the super empath, gentle as they are, rises, not in anger, but in authority. It's a quiet rising, often unnoticed by the world at first, but in the spiritual realm it sends a clear message. I am no longer who I was. The empath who once absorbed the pain, who gave second, third, and 10th chances, who believed in the best even when shown the worst, now stands with a new kind of strength. Not hardened, but refined. Not bitter, but bold. And it's here in this sacred evolution that something powerful happens. The empath becomes the catalyst for change, not only in their own life, but in the structures, the systems, the relationships that once held them hostage. The narcissist, for all their manipulation and illusion, depends on one crucial thing: access. Access to your time, your energy, your belief in them, your willingness to keep explaining, keep defending, keep trying. But when the super empath awakens, they begin to take that access back. Piece by piece, moment by moment, they close the door. Not with malice, but with clarity. And that closed door is the beginning of the narcissist's unravel. This isn't about revenge. It's not about punishment. It's about alignment. The empath no longer bends themselves out of shape to make others comfortable. They no longer sacrifice peace for proximity. They begin to choose what is holy over what is familiar. They begin to listen to the still, small voice that was whispering all along. You were never meant to stay in a place that breaks your spirit. It's easy to underestimate the impact of this awakening. But make no mistake, when someone who once played small begins to live in their full truth, it changes everything. Suddenly the lies lose their power. The manipulation loses its grip. The narcissist, once the master of the room, is left fumbling for control that no longer exists. And the empath doesn't have to shout. They don't have to explain themselves. Their peace speaks louder than any argument ever could. Their presence, healed, whole, no longer available for abuse, becomes the very thing that breaks the cycle. Because evil doesn't know what to do with someone who refuses to be a victim and refuses to become an oppressor. That's the divine middle ground the super empath walks, and it is holy. This awakening is not just personal, it's prophetic. When a super empath walks away, it sends ripples into generations. Children learn what love truly looks like. Families begin to heal. Cycles of control, of silence, of pretending, it all begins to crumble. All because one person dared to say, no more. And I'll tell you something, this kind of courage doesn't come from self-help books or clever strategies. It comes from God. It comes from the refining fire of pain transformed into purpose. It comes from nights spent weeping and praying and wondering, Lord, is there more for me than this? And heaven always answers, yes. Yes, there is. You see, the super empath doesn't just destroy the narcissist's illusion. They expose it with their life, with their healing, with their refusal to stay in a story that no longer honors who they truly are. And in doing so, they don't just set themselves free. They shine a light for others who are still in the dark. This is not just about surviving a toxic relationship. It's about becoming a vessel for truth in a world that desperately needs it. It's about carrying light into places where manipulation once ruled. It's about rising not with rage, but with righteousness. So if you feel that stirring in your soul, if something inside you knows it's time to stand, to speak, to step forward, listen to it. That is not pride. That is purpose. That is the voice of God calling you into freedom, because the moment you stop explaining your worth is the moment heaven begins revealing it.